Hello, everyone, and welcome back to part 2 of our interview with Matt and Stephanie. Hey, guys.
Hey.
Hey.
So, if you guys are just joining us, you should have already watched or listened to Matt and Stephanie's part 1. We talked a lot about Matt being sexually abused by his grandpa, who was somebody who was very much higher up within the LDS church, talking about a lot of the issues there with systemic abuse and cover-ups and people not being able to speak out about things that have happened to them within the church. And then we also got into Matt's mission and talking about his mission call to Cleveland and struggling with pornography and masturbation growing up. And we also chatted with Stephanie about, let's see, just like a kind of tumultuous parents' divorce growing up in Utah County and things that happened in the beginning of their marriage and how things kind of progressed with their infertility, moving out to go to law school at Notre Dame. And then I think right kind of where we left off was talking about, I think getting into more of the infertility talk and trying to have kids. And so if you guys are ready for it, we're going to go into a part 2 now, talking about what happened as they started to work through their infertility issues and what led them to start to question leadership of the LDS church. And I think a lot of the Mormon Stories viewers will relate to a lot of their stories. So I hope you guys are buckled in, ready for part 2 of this super epic Mormon story with me, your host, Carah Burrell. So if you didn't already notice, I am not John DeLynn. John had to run. We are recording kind of extra late tonight to do this part 2 that we wanted to squeeze in live today. But as always, I have my trusted co-host, a can of Red Bull that's going to get us through this. So, and yes, I have the ponytails, the pigtails braids. If you're listening to this in audio, again, I just can't encourage you enough to run over to the video. Make sure you see me looking like a 12-year-old girl who just wandered in from girls camp and get back to listening in audio. So we're ready. Yes, we're ready to rock and roll. So, all right. Matt, Stephanie, welcome back.
Thank you.
Glad to be back.
Yeah.
Full bellies.
It's been a long time.
Yeah. So take us into the next part of your Mormon story and anything else you want to add, any other thoughts since we left off on our first part of the interview. Anything else you want to add? Are you just ready to jump into it?
I think just jump into it.
Okay. So let's jump into part 2. You guys were talking about struggling to have kids, yeah?
Yeah. Well, so before that though, we were living out in Indiana and this was pretty recent, like pretty soon after we moved out to Indiana. And I received a calling to be an early morning seminary teacher. So they wanted me to drive to the church, which was 25 minutes away every morning and teach seminary and then drive back home, I guess, and get Matt when we would drive to school. Just like logistically, it would not work. And so I was panicking because I had never said no to a calling before. Because I think Matt had learned about it or they had kind of hinted at what it might be. We kind of put the pieces together. That's what they were going to call me to be. And so when I don't know, was he a high counselor?
Yeah.
When the high counselor came over to extend the call, I just said, no, like that's not going to work for us. Matt was in law school and I was working full time and we only had one car, just like the logistics would not have worked. And so, yeah, so I just said, no, that's not going to work for me. And he was like shocked. Like how could you say no?
He had no idea how to respond.
Yeah. That was kind of my first experience or one of my first experiences with like kind of setting a boundary, saying no to the church and him being pretty shocked by that. And I think it also opened my eyes to the fact that like not every calling is inspired.
For
that
sure.
clearly like would not have worked.
Right. And I remember trying to talk through different scenarios to figure out if we could make it work. Because again, I was all in. And the school's one direction, early morning seminary would be the opposite direction, and then our apartment. There's this big triangle essentially that she would have to travel every morning, Monday through Friday, and there's no way it would work, especially with my schedule. Plus, Stephanie was already taking care of most things in the apartment. She was doing all the shopping and making food, working full time at the university. Also, I could just focus on studying.
Mhm.
And I didn't have any free time. She didn't have any free time. But with this calling, she would have to not only go to early morning seminary and teach that in the morning,
Mhm.
but then she'd have to come home at night and prepare the next day's lesson.
And go to bed early so I could wake up at, I don't know, 5 in the morning to get ready for work, make lunch for myself, and then go teach seminary. And it just like, how can you expect that? Like the fact that they even asked me was like, how do you even expect that from someone? It was
Yeah.
like a second job.
Right. And I don't know that this is reality, but for me, it seems at times there are church leaders who want to test the faith and the commitment of the members they're over. So I remember when I was down at BYU, there was state conference, and state conference was scheduled on the same night as this really big football game, which had been scheduled in advance. It was BYU playing in it at home, and yet they scheduled the adult session or whatever on the Saturday. And so you have to choose. You have to choose between, one of your hobbies or, supporting a friend who's on the team, whatever it is, and following God.
Yeah.
And and then if in the event that you make the good decision, the right decision to go to the meeting that they've scheduled, they give you the comment that you're among the elect. You guys are willing to pay the price to follow the Lord and try to reinforce that behavior so you do it again next time. So I think the same can be true with callings. There's often no regard to the individual's situation or their family situation, and it's just, well, I think it'd be a good fit for them, or I think it'll stretch them, whatever it is. And half the time they don't have a clue of what's really going on in that person's lives. And it's like the person receiving the calling has to explain in detail why they are too busy to take on the calling. They have to justify saying no.
Yep.
Which is backwards in my mind. You should be able to say no, and if things work out and you have the extra time, then sure, help with the calling.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, do you even have the ability to say no if the consequences for saying no are so severe that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're not gonna be with your family forever or whatever. It's funny because just today I sent Matt this quote, but Sister Nielsen, the wife of Brent Nelson, Elder Nelson, that gave the talk today about core horrors and all that stuff, said, "You are tempted to say no. That's way too much. But when you get a calling from the Lord, whatever your life looks like, you just shift it, you adjust. The Lord always picks up the difference and blesses your effort with wonderful things." And so just this, I mean, this just overarching idea in the church that like, we've had lessons in Sunday school about how you never say no to a calling. Like how could you, right? And so saying no to this calling was a big deal. And a big realization to me, I think that like not every calling is inspired and I need to think for myself.
Yeah.
My first experience with that whole inspired, calling thing was on my mission. I was with the mission president one day, and we were trying to figure out what the next round of transfers were going to be. And I love my mission president. He's a wonderful man. But he explained to me how it works, and we would say a prayer before, and then there's a board of 160 pictures on the wall, giant whiteboard with names of all the different areas. And literally the three of us would just walk around, grab a name, stick it next to it. Yeah, that looks good, and move on. Or we'd say, those two aren't really interested in doing anything. So rather than, ruin the experience for two other missionaries, let's just put them together and they can play their board game or whatever they want to do instead of go out and teach people. And I was kind of surprised, and I don't really know what I was expecting. I certainly wasn't expecting, some message from God directing us to put the right companionships together.
Ouija board.
But I was expecting more than what seemed like even less than an educated guess as to what would be good. It's like, if that is not immediately wrong in my mind, it's probably fine, and let's do it. But as a missionary, you think, okay, the Lord has sent me to this specific apartment for this specific area because there are people here who I can touch and no one else. And my companion is here to teach me certain things, and this is all from God. When it's not.
Yeah.
That just was not
John
my
has
experience.
told me quite a few times that, from Mormon Story guests that have been on, like when you get into a certain leadership position, you see how the sausage is being made. Your faith shifts because you went from being a cog in the machine to being part of the machine. And it's not as inspired as you originally thought. And you realize that these are just people within an institution trying their best in a lot of ways.
Right.
And we've been putting a lot of God magic and putting people in positions that somebody needs to feel it. So this person will do,
Yeah.
And especially with something like early morning seminary, that is a commitment and a half, like you were saying.
Yeah. Just completely nuts. So that was kind of a big thing. And then we obviously kept trying to have kids. We had done IUI, which is intrauterine insemination. Yeah. Okay. So that's just where they like take Matt's sperm and then put it up inside of me closer to where, like close to my fallopian tube, so that it can fertilize eggs.
Sexy. Okay.
Yeah. It's great. Great way. So that didn't work. And then they pretty much told us that we needed IVF, which is in vitro fertilization, where they take my eggs out and then they actually, sometimes they just put Matt's sperm in a dish with my eggs and wait for them to fertilize. But we also had to have the sperm injected into the egg to like manually fertilize them. So, we were wanting to do that for a long time. We didn't have the money to do it. And I don't know, I just felt like I should be more open about that part of our journey online. We had a blog. And so I started talking about our infertility, and we got sponsored by a nonprofit that helped us pay for IVF. And so Matt was out here for an internship, and I flew out here and we did IVF over the summer. And this was like 5 years in, I think, to trying to have kids. And it didn't work. And that was really devastating. And again, just like, pleading with God, like, please, like, let me have a child. And while I'm just like waiting around to have kids, is so interesting because I look back, like my boss at Notre Dame was the dean of science, and he kept encouraging me to like, hey, you can take classes here. And like, because you're an employee, you get a huge discount or something, or some amount of credits for free or something. But I was just like, nah, like I'm just working on my next checklist item. Like the next thing I'm supposed to do is have kids. So let's like tunnel vision babies, And I look back and I'm like, it took 6.5 years for us to finally have kids. And I could have been like, I had a good job and stuff, but like I could have really been working on a career and getting an education or whatever. And instead I was just like, next item on the list that I was given. We were able to do IVF again, like in January of 2014. And I got pregnant. But then
Twins, right?
yeah, with twins, and miscarried one, and the other one was ectopic. And so that was pretty traumatic because I basically had 2 miscarriages because I miscarried, and then they kept testing my hormone levels and discovered that I also had an ectopic pregnancy. So my numbers started rising again, but not normally, not enough to be a viable pregnancy. So anyway, they had to basically like give me methotrexate, and I guess it's a chemical abortion. I guess that's what it is. But anyway, so my body would like miscarry the ectopic pregnancy as well. So we did that. And then we had to be on birth control for like 3 months because it would cause birth defects or whatever if we got pregnant. And during that time, we moved back to Utah for Matt's job. And
Well, hold on. The whole ectopic thing was horrible.
yeah.
Yeah. How does that describe how in the mind of like, a faithful Latter-day Saint couple, how do you figure out infertility? How do you see yourself and your relationship with God and your spouse when you are faithful and you're trying your best, but you still are not given a baby? Like, what is that like when because it's already hard enough. Did your faith help you? Did it hinder you? Did it make you feel like you were not doing enough?
In some ways it helped. Like I remember reading conference talks about how like, not yet. I think maybe Bednar gave that talk about like how sometimes when we pray, the answer is not yet or whatever. And I mean, my patriarchal blessing said that I will become a mother in this lifetime. And that was a huge comfort to me because during that process. So like, I will like to give that credit. Like, I mean, even though I don't believe in patriarchal blessings like that they're some revelation for me, like that was something that gave me comfort at the time. But then there are other parts of Mormonism that made it more difficult, right? Like I was just so focused on like my next thing is become a mother, and that's my duty and that's my divine calling. And so that part made it more painful. So it was a combination of both. I do think I have a tendency, I don't know if you'd agree, but like when something is traumatic, a lot of times I just kind of like gloss over it. Like I'll talk about it like, do you know what I mean?
Like you just did?
Like I just did, right? But I do it all the time. And my therapist has pointed it out to me too. I think it's like a coping mechanism for me to just kind of like casually mention something. But that was really, really traumatic because I didn't realize that having a miscarriage was like giving birth to a very premature fetus, and so like, I mean, the contractions and everything, it was really, and then I had to do it again. And there was part of me that like when my hormone levels started rising again, I was like, like it kind of, maybe there's still hope. Right. And, this was 5.5 years in and I was so desperate for a baby. And then I had to go through all of it again. And it was traumatic and really hard.
Yeah,
was it for you?
I remember sitting down with the doctor and having him explain to me exactly what was happening. And I don't want to turn this into some discussion on abortion, but I was, in line with the church's teaching on abortion and when it's okay and when it's not. And this situation, when the doctor said, essentially, you need to have an abortion, I kind of got sick over that. And again, asked him to explain in detail why we need to do that. And, he confirmed that there is 0 chance of this fetus surviving. But if we don't do this, Stephanie will probably die. And so, based on those circumstances, I felt okay doing it, but it's still really bothering me. And it certainly changed my perspective on the really difficult issues that, are in public debate every day.
Right.
Because things are not as black and white
Exactly.
as everyone claims they are. And until you experience it yourself, until you're in that scenario and have to make the decision, you don't really know what you would do. And whatever you do, you have to live with the decision. And I'm certainly glad we made the decision we did, but it was a very, very difficult time for us, all while, I'm studying for my law school exams and Steph's working full time, and we're in Indiana, so we don't have any family near. So yeah, it was tough, but I feel that infertility really brought us together, and we were each other's best support through all of that. So for that reason, I'm grateful for that difficult time of our lives.
Yeah. And I also would say that, like, when we initially started trying for kids, like, we were just doing it because that's what we were supposed to do next, right? And we weren't ready. Like, looking back, it's hard because, like, it doesn't take away from the fact that those years were some of the most painful years of my life. And just, like, pregnancy announcements all the time, and,
Yeah.
like, everything just, like, hurt so bad. I remember, like, leaving church crying so many times, people asking us, like, "When are you gonna have kids?" Or, "Why didn't you just adopt a baby from Africa?" And I'm like, what, is there a drive-through line? Like, I just call and order a baby and, like, I can pick it up? Like, I don't know. And so there were just a lot of insensitive comments around infertility that made it really difficult.
Yeah,
But
because the culture is that's your purpose for existing.
Mhm.
You can do no greater work than having a kid.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you're right. There is, like, so much gray area when it comes to this stuff that you don't even think about. Like, we had extra embryos, and we had to make the decision of, are we going to donate these embryos so that someone else can raise our child? You know what I mean? Or are we going to, like, thaw them and just let them not survive? They're 5-day-old embryos, and I had really, really painful pregnancies, and they did a number on my body, and I have some health problems and stuff, so it just wasn't feasible for us to have more kids. And
you'll never know what decision we made.
Yeah. You don't want
I've
to tell
seen your
them?
Instagram. I have an
I don't
idea.
Yeah. But you could probably guess that, yeah, we let them thaw because I just couldn't stomach the idea of, like, what a kid looks like our kids running around, I don't know, with other parents. So anyway, that was the decision we made. But it's really hard. And like Matt said, you don't know what decision you'd make until you're in that situation. And so, yeah. So that was kind of our last experience with with infertility until we moved to Utah. And we had planned on doing another cycle. And so I would have just, like, stayed on birth control that's just how you start IVF. It's, like, on birth control, and then they take control of your cycle. But I felt like we should wait. And so I called them and said, we're going to put it off for now. And
Partly because we'd been through a lot and
yeah.
it was traumatizing.
Yeah.
We weren't ready to do that again.
Yeah. And it's very expensive. And we had just moved to Utah and we're trying to get settled and everything. So put it off, went off birth control. And 2 weeks later, I was pregnant. So,
Oh, natural.
Yep. It was crazy. I don't know. But
You're blessed.
Yes, very blessed.
How did you interpret that at the time, at least?
That it was a miracle. Yeah. And I don't
Huge.
know, like, I don't really know what my beliefs are in a higher power and how much they like intervene, right? It's difficult for me. I mean, even at the time, it's like I'm praying, pleading with God for something that is righteous, something I'm commanded to do in the temple, right? Multiply and replenish the earth. And yet I'm not getting it. But, you know, Karen, poor Karen's in the world, but Karen gets up in church on Sunday and bears her testimony about how God helped her find her car keys, you know?
Mhm.
And so, and even still, it's hard for me to believe that God intervened and blessed us with our daughter Madeline, and yet, like, so many children are being abused and starving and, you know, in the world, and he's not intervening there. So it's just, or she, or what, the higher power. Anyway, so yeah, I don't know what I like believe about that now, but I know that I'm very grateful for our daughter.
Yeah. of course.
And I will say that, like, I was so traumatized by infertility that when I was pregnant with Madeline, I was anxious the whole pregnancy that something was wrong. I had like spotting kind of throughout. And even when we were heading to the hospital, I was worried that we would come home without a baby. And I just like was really traumatized. And then I had postpartum anxiety pretty bad, like just thinking like I didn't want to go get her from her naps because I was worried that she wouldn't be alive. And so I'd send Matt in because I didn't want to be the one to find her. And so it just like it really, really, that loss and that grief really I think just traumatized me entering into parenthood. But it's gotten better. Like I had it after each child, postpartum anxiety and depression. But then like it's relieved with time. But
They are both very real. And
Right.
again, if you have a loved one who's going through it, you know what we're talking about, and you can't adequately describe what you see the person going through, but it's painful. It's painful not being able to help the person that you love, who's right there next to you, suffering, and and in a way that, you know, I did that to her, or contributed to that, and yet there's nothing I can do to help her through it, other than, you know, be there with her. So it's hard, and my heart goes out to everyone who has to deal with depression or anxiety, particularly though the postpartum. It's hard for the entire family.
yeah, it really is.
And Matt, correct me if I'm wrong. Did you mention in part 1 that part of your patriarchal blessing about you growing up, having kids was kind of felt like dependent on your righteousness?
On
And
my obedience to the law of chastity.
oh, right. Did that play into like your complications with how you felt about your like infertility
Oh yeah,
issues?
I thought I was absolutely the cause of her pain,
Really?
and I think she felt that way too, at least at times.
Yeah. Well,
We
like to a
would
lesser
fight,
degree.
and she
yeah.
would blame me that she's suffering because she can't have kids because I'm looking at porn.
Oh, so you were talking earlier about like the kind of God you were worshiping, which always fascinates me because people have different constructions of God in their head all the time. And the one that you were talking about, that is like that bully kind of God that was going to beat you into submission
Right.
to be obedient, the one you're describing on your mission and things like that, that you worshiped this kind of God that would literally cause all of this pain in your marriage. Keep like Stephanie didn't do anything, but because you can't like control yourself or whatever, looking at porn, or maybe it was even before you even got married to her that these sins could have carried over. All of that is the type of God that you were thinking about?
Yeah, because in Mormonism, we try to, well, whether we do it consciously, intentionally or not, we do it. We try to assign meaning to everything.
Right. It's huge.
If bad things happen to me as an active Mormon, it's a trial of my faith, right? If I'm sinning on the side or, doing some things, not living up to the expectations of the church, and bad things happen, that's sweet justice. And it's God trying to get me back on track. But then, outside of the church, it's like anytime something good happens, it's, well, everyone gets lucky now and then, or chance, whatever it is. But there's always an explanation for what is happening in my life and what is happening in my neighbor's life, and it allows me to then place judgment on everything, cause and effect, as if God is just this vending machine where all they have to do is put in the money and push the button and it'll spit out what I want. And I've found that that's not reality, but that is reality. At least it was for me when I was active in Mormonism.
Yeah, it just reminds me, you guys run kind of like a meme page too, right? We're millennials here. We're going to be referencing memes as much as we can.
Yes.
And quotes and things like that. There's this thing called the Mormon blame chart. And it's this quadrant.
Yes.
You guys have seen this one?
It's a good one.
Yeah. Of like if something good happens and you're a faithful, righteous member, they are receiving blessings from our Heavenly Father for their continued righteousness and tithing contributions. But if there's something good happens and you're not a faithful member, it's non-member ex-Mormon. They think they're happy, but sadly they will never know true happiness.
Yes.
Everything is interpreted through the lens, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like you're looking for signs, which is always weird to me because I was always told, be ye not seekers of signs as well. But that's true. It's like if something good happens, it's just a confirmation that you're on the right track. Something bad, it's a trial of your faith. And so you throw things as devastating as your eternal family into this mix. Like that's just ground for trauma.
Well, yeah, and that God is
Horrible.
depriving her because of what I did. That's what I was carrying for those years.
It's a heavy load.
And so to get pregnant on our own after I'd been sober for quite a while, coincidentally, I connected that dot to
so
that.
that was what you were connecting.
Well, yeah, because
Okay.
I had just hit like my year sobriety mark or whatever. And like 2 days later, she told me or whatever.
Yeah.
And
I don't think it was that long. But yeah, because I
Anyway.
think you found it in October and I got pregnant in May. But yeah. Anyway, yeah. So
whatever.
The natural question that
6
I have
months.
to ask, excuse me if this is too personal, because the natural question of where my brain goes is because if you aren't looking at porn or masturbating, you're dropping off all of those guys right at Stephanie's front door. And that's why you got pregnant.
That must be it.
That must be it.
It's less about God doing some magic there, but you got pregnant and you attributed that to your righteousness.
Yeah, or at least lack of extreme wickedness.
You were doing
Because I would never call myself a righteous person. Because I always knew deep down who I really was this person who, would lust after people sometimes. And that's a horrible thing. And that defined me. Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's another thing we do in the church is we label things and people and try to kind of dehumanize in a way, or at least generalize people, take away their individuality, their identity. You're just a brother. You're just a sister now. And I've had to learn to step away from that mentality of labeling things and assigning meaning to everything that happens in life. It's just life. Good things happen to everyone and bad things happen to everyone. Yep. And sometimes there are things that I can control and other times I have no control over what happens.
Yeah, I mean, we recently had kind of a string of bad luck. Like our basement flooded, and I was having a bunch of health. I had surgery and a bunch of health problems, and I don't know. There were like a million things, but like there were a couple people that said something to me about like, oh, it's because you left the church or whatever, and then you know that people are kind of thinking like, oh, good, maybe these trials will bring them back to the church, right? And I know people are thinking that because I thought that about people who left. I thought like, oh, maybe their life will get really hard and it will bring them back to the church.
We're taught that.
And it's like, that's pretty sick that you're like almost rooting for someone
To suffer.
so that they'll come back to church.
Because what is the natural reaction when your basement floods and somebody says you should come back to church? Personally, when something bad happens to me, like I had really bad postpartum depression as well after my 3 kids, and 2020 was a hellish year for all of us. My symptoms were so bad. I thought I had MS. I had like 10 symptoms from MS because my body was just not functioning. And my mom said it was because I left the church, that God was cursing me. And what does that do? It tells you, I don't want to be anywhere near that God.
Right.
Yes.
I don't want to be near your people. I don't want to be associated with a God that would curse me after I just gave birth like this, you know?
Yeah.
It's kind of the backfire effect in a way, but
yeah, you hear in general
absolutely.
conference, the church leaders talking about the nature of God and how he loves us perfectly and he wants what's best for us. And he's like the perfect parent, right? And I look at myself as a father, and I look at my relationship with my children, and I would not do half of the things that I believed the Mormon God was inflicting upon me.
Yeah.
I would not want that for any of my children.
Yeah. I feel like having kids caused a major shift in my belief about God, just because I can't believe in that God.
Yeah, because again, it removes the individuality. So the Mormon God says, this is who I want you to be, and surprise, everyone is going to look the same. Everyone's going to be the same. We're all going to follow this straight and narrow path and, arrive at this happy destination where there are no problems. So it's like you are born different and the end goal is to be the same.
yeah.
Whereas with my children, I embrace their differences, their individuality. I want them to be their best self. I don't want to map out what they're supposed to do in life. I want to be there to share wisdom that I've experienced and acquired through making a lot of mistakes, so that hopefully they don't have to repeat some of those. But I don't have in mind who I want them to be in the end, other than I want you to be happy and be a good, kind person to other people. And so if I feel that way toward my children, and I'm just some guy living in Utah, this God who supposedly loves me much more than I could ever love my children would be kinder to me than this God is being. And so I came to, again, identify those things that I believe Mormonism taught me about God, and I had to, discard them because they were no longer helpful for me.
Yeah, I think I'm always really inspired when people have, similar opinions to that becoming a parent made them reevaluate the type of parent they want to be and second guess if the Father in heaven that they worship is something that they actually would want in their household to be raising their kids. And there's obviously beautiful things about redemption and second chances, and there's things like that are the good parts that I think we can cherry pick, and we can find a lot of solace in. But yeah, thanks for sharing that. So around this period is when you had a healthy birth, and so do you want to go into that section?
Yeah. So After I had her, it was in like February of 2015. And in November is when they came out with the policy of exclusion. And I feel like that was a big shelf item for me that I didn't even realize, like before I even knew I had a shelf.
What part of it bothered you? And also for our non-Mormon listeners, the 2015 exclusion policy. Do you want to give us a quick summary?
It excluded the children of any gay person from being baptized before the age of 18, at which point they would have to like disavow their parents' behavior / marriage, I guess. And then they could be baptized. And it was just really weird because it wasn't like, and they said it was to protect families so that, the children didn't have a different belief than their parents and cause conflict, which it's like, but you didn't exclude the parents who were living with a boyfriend or not obeying the law of chastity or not obeying the word of wisdom. Like their children were still welcome to get baptized at the age of 8. It was only if you were gay.
Well, and the church explained. So I guess to backtrack, what happened is there was some leak of the policy. There was, some assistant for one of the higher ups in the church office building.
Yeah, because it's not like this comes across the pulpit or anything. It's
No.
usually through like the church handbook, and then there's a leak.
Exactly.
People are like, "Whoa, what changed?"
So there was some sort of leak, and it hit the news in Utah, and then spread quickly. And so the church, tried to do some damage control, and they held a press conference. Well, it was an interview. It wasn't a press conference. The Mormon Church doesn't have press conferences. You had one church employee interviewing one of the apostles, and they chose Todd Christofferson because he has a brother who's openly gay.
That also was.
Of course, they didn't say that, but that's what everyone thought. So he comes out and explains the policy. And when you hear the explanation, as a faithful member of the church, it did not sit right with me, because I thought, why would you prevent an infant from getting a baby blessing because one of his parents is in a homosexual relationship? It made no sense at all. Yeah. And of course it came out within a few months of the Supreme Court's ruling that gay marriage, a ban on gay marriage was unconstitutional. Mm-hmm. So, and the church admits that. The church admits that.
They said that.
That they gathered together and figured it out, but it was in response to the U.S. Supreme Court decision that essentially legalized gay marriage in every state.
But it was like, even though that felt so wrong to me, I just like pushed that feeling aside because follow the prophet. He knows the way. And so I was like, it must be from God because it came from the prophet. And again, I feel like it's just that theme of like authority, like trusting authority over my own intuition or gut feelings or whatever, conscience, and just giving them all the power. And that's what happened with the OBGYN. And it happened again where I just repeated the arguments that they gave in defense of the policy.
Were you like outspoken and vocal online or just in your own head?
I was trying to remember, like I was definitely vocal and outspoken about Prop 8. And I have deep, deep regrets for that because I said some really hurtful things, some things I don't even remember, but one in particular to a high school friend who's gay. And I don't know if I knew at the time that he was gay or at least that he was out. But anyway, I just said some really hurtful things about the policy. And I'm just really grateful that he's still here because you can say hurtful things. And, I was defending the church's stance, and I thought I was being righteous and doing a good thing. And I mean, how many people LGBTQ people in the church have died by suicide because of hurtful statements from church members and church leaders. And anyway, so I have deep regrets about that. I don't know. I think by the time the 2015 policy came out, I felt sick enough about it. I don't think I said a lot in defense of it, but it may have been more in conversation or in my own head, right? I accepted those excuses and just kind of set it aside. I put it on the shelf.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
What?
And
Oh, good.
I was just going to ask, Matt, as somebody who served a mission, my husband also served a mission in the, Midwest there. And his biggest problem is he didn't understand that on his mission, he was always preaching that you need the Holy Ghost. The Holy Ghost will give you the answers. And then suddenly the prophet is telling people that you don't need the Holy Ghost. You don't need to get baptized if your parents are gay. As I think maybe people who serve a mission have a different view of that policy. I was just wondering if that was something that ever crossed your mind, that suddenly the Holy Ghost wasn't so important anymore.
Right. And the priesthood, right?
Yeah,
So
12-years don't need the priesthood power anymore.
yeah.
Mhm.
So again, my mentality was Book of Mormon's true. Monson was the prophet at the time. He's God's prophet. So I know what the end result is. I just need to figure out how to get there, because this policy is from God. So navigate all these inconsistencies and contradictions some way. And usually you do it just by generalizing your explanation. Well, we just don't want to cause problems in the home, and we don't want to have them choose between God and their family, which ironically is exactly what they tell missionaries to teach people every day.
Yeah.
Oh, you're Catholic? Well, do you want to be Catholic with your family, or do you want to be with God? Because if you want to be God, you need to become a Mormon. And so again, just more inconsistencies, but you have to ultimately, regardless of where you come down on things, ultimately you have to get in line.
Right.
And put your arm to the square to sustain them.
Yeah. And what I think Mormon Stories is just people telling their faith journeys like this is so valuable, is because so many of us felt uncomfortable with that policy or other things, and we just didn't say it. And you can see other people. I don't know if you knew anybody who left the church at that time. You're like, oh, secretly judging them. I have the faith to keep going, even though deep down you're like, oh, I
No,
kind of
I
wish I
don't.
could do that, because
Yeah.
that's exactly, because this really isn't making sense right now. So did you know people at the time that
Yeah.
left the church over it?
Actually, my brother left around that time. But he didn't tell me that he left until 2017, which just goes to show you how difficult it is in the church to be honest about your feelings about, I don't believe anymore. It's that's not an acceptable choice, right? And so what's hard is I remember judging him for leaving and thinking oh, they, just want to do other things on Sunday. And that's why they left, And I would have lots of conversations with my brother about the church. And it did kind of get me thinking. It's obviously not his fault that I left the church, but he did bring up a lot of issues that, I don't know, kind of just got me thinking a little bit more. But yeah.
So what was the next thing that triggered you to really question?
Yeah, I was trying to think. Well, so I had some painful pregnancies that caused, I kind of mentioned that, some health problems. And I was in primary at the time, and asked to be released with our bishop. I don't know if you remember this, but I told him that I was having a lot of pain in my hips. I have SI joint dysfunction. And I remember him just like telling me some story about an athlete that just, played through the pain and walked it off kind of thing.
No.
And
Oh no.
and
For
I was
9
just like,
months.
and I was like, no, like that's a nice story, but I'm not going to do that. So I asked to be released anyway, and was released from my calling. But just like the idea that like even that, you don't say no to callings, you don't ask to be released from callings. It's just kind of this no thing. So that was
Right.
yeah.
Because the attitude is, well, everyone has a rough life.
Yeah.
I'm doing it and I'm spending more time on it than you are. So quit
And,
complaining.
Like
you know?
until you've experienced chronic health problems and chronic pain, it's difficult to understand, but you can't just like walk it off.
Mhm.
And around this time, I was in another 12-step program that really, really helped me with, like learning about boundaries and autonomy, and also letting go of Matt's pornography use, in the way that like it still bothered me, but I was able to view it more. And I think it bothered me just because like I it was like a coping mechanism. Like it wasn't like he was making a conscious choice of like, oh, like today I want to view porn or whatever. It was like he was in pain or struggling or frustrated or extremely stressed, and then would like make this decision that he would regret later. So anyway, it just didn't feel healthy to me, but I was able to just like let it go and be like, that's Matt's thing and it's not about me. And so like my 12-step program really helped me gain a little bit more, or kind of let go of like that codependency of trying to control the porn use, or thinking that it was some reflection of me or whatever. So that wasn't a super helpful thing to me. And then it also helped me to, for one of the first times in my life, really make genuine friendships and be vulnerable with people. And I felt like that was something that I like found occasionally in the church. I definitely made some good, real friends in the church, but it was interesting to go to 12-step and feel the spirit, what I thought was the spirit, more at those meetings than I did at church. And I started feeling like what I thought was feeling the spirit was actually just like human connection, right? With people who are genuine and vulnerable and sharing their stories. And that's when I would feel that like love in my heart. So that was kind of an interesting experience for me to compare that to church. We'd talk about that all the time. I remember how it was so much more uplifting to go to a 12-step meeting than it was to go to church.
Right. You have people being honest about things they're struggling with, and talking about solutions and fellowshipping with each other. So it's, while you would, as Steph said, you would have glimpses, moments of that at church. Those were not very common.
A lot of times people put on that front of like matching outfits for their kids and perfect hair, and here we are with our family, and
yeah, and we did that.
And we did that too. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of furthering that narrative that like you want a nice righteous family that would never think of looking at porn. No one's vulnerable
Right.
enough
Oh
to
yeah.
be like that, you know?
Yeah. If you said something like that at church, everybody would be like, what? Can't believe you just said that out loud. When it's like, but like 90% of the elders quorum is doing that like weekly, probably.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. Do they ever get that raw and vulnerable in elders quorum? Do they ever say?
Not in the wards I've been in. I've heard there have been some, but
yeah, and then it's like, I'm not shaking your hand after church, brother. Gross. Like they don't want to get into that. And so remind me, was this a specific 12-step program not run by the church that was for men who struggle with pornography and their spouses?
There was like a different program for spouses of sex addicts, I guess.
And so it was helpful. And is it something you'd recommend? Do you want to like shout out its name or anything?
No.
I'm not
you'd recommend anymore?
I'm not supposed to. It's like
okay,
an AA rule, I guess.
It's a type of AA. Okay.
Yeah, it's a extension or a, I don't know. Copy.
It's based on the 12 steps.
There we go. It's based on the 12 steps.
But there are a lot of awesome awesome groups out there that have, different definitions of sobriety, whatever it is. And I think they do a lot of good.
I agree. So yeah, that was a huge thing for me. I felt like, yeah, I don't know. It just kind of got me thinking for myself more, learned about boundaries, all that stuff. Then I had an active friend tell me that she stopped wearing garments to improve her body image, and it worked for her. And so I kind of started thinking about it a little bit. And after I had my youngest in 2018, I would just go through little periods here and there where I wouldn't wear them for a little while. And I did notice that I felt better about my body.
I'm learning this for the first time live.
What? You didn't
Felt
notice
better
that I wasn't wearing garments?
What?
You didn't even notice that I wasn't wearing garments?
I don't recall that.
Yeah, I mean, I was still at the time, but like I would, days here and there, I would go without.
You're hearing it here live, folks. Husband doesn't notice wife not wearing long johns to bed anymore. Sexy underwear went unnoticed by husband. That's a headline.
Yeah.
Yes,
What the hell?
I missed out, apparently.
Yeah. What is this?
You like slip them on like in bed underneath the covers. Never for him to see.
Yeah.
Is there anything less attractive than garments? I mean, let's get real for a second.
I remember
they want you to multiply and replenish the earth.
And that's the best.
Doesn't seem that way.
I remember like talking to our bishop about that. About like,
really?
Yeah. I can't remember how it came up. If he was asking me about,
Your
I don't
underwear?
know, issues I had with the church or something. And I was talking about this next part that I'm going to bring up. But I remember saying that I feel a lot better about myself when I'm not wearing garments. And he was like, what do you mean? Why? And I was like, are you serious? Isn't it obvious? Like they're the least attractive underwear you can possibly imagine. So I like heard something like whispers about this, not whispers, but I heard something about this and started doing a little bit more research about how the church gaslights its members.
And what's gaslighting?
Yeah, so gaslighting is like making you think something different than what's real, basically. Like
Questioning your own reality.
Yeah, making you question reality.
Trying to convince you that something didn't happen that actually did happen, or vice
the other
versa.
way around.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be one example of it. So, yeah, so the garment question used to be, they changed it in October 2019, but it used to be, if you have previously received your temple endowment, do you keep the covenants that you made in the temple? Do you wear the garment both night and day as instructed in the endowment and in accordance with the covenant you made in the temple? And I learned that we don't covenant to wear our garments in the temple. We're instructed to wear them throughout our lives, by the way, which is different than day and night, because someone could wear them once a month to the temple and you could still consider that to be throughout your life. But they changed it. You know what I mean? They like changed the wording in the recommend interview to make people think that they need to wear them day and night because that's what they wanted them to do. And also that they covenanted to do that. And that's not a temple covenant. And that like people are walking around thinking they covenanted to wear their garments and judging other people for not wearing their garments, right? They go on a trip and they're wearing a tank top dress or whatever. And you're like,
apostate.
Oh yeah. What a terrible person.
Perception is, at least what I thought was, you have the spirit with you when you wear your garments, and then your protection, it's who knows what's going to happen if you take off that physical protection, that barrier. And just like a wedding ring signifies to the world, I'm taken by Carah Burrell. These garments say I'm taken by Jesus. It's like it lets God know that I'm on his side. And when you take them off, unless you're making a baby or having a shower or maybe doing some exercise, you're like up for Satan's taking. Because that was always my perception, right?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of
that you're
and you
protected.
get and all these rules about them
Oh,
come from who knows where,
yes.
but they can't be on the ground. You need to put them on immediately after you're done having sex. There's no cuddling or anything like
Yep.
that.
No cuddling naked. It's forbidden.
And certainly can't fall asleep naked.
Oh, that'd be the worst. Or leave them on the floor.
Yeah, I already said that.
Oh, well, but like, you know, when you're getting undressed for sex, it's like, oh, you have to like fold them nicely and put them on the dresser. I don't know. It's just,
Can you believe Mormons have so many kids? That's how it all starts.
It's hard to
Folding
believe.
garments, and then we have 10 kids. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. And then like the fact that they changed it and they've changed, like, you guys should go back and look at how the temple recommend questions have changed over time. Because
Shocking.
yes. And the timing, like they didn't add the questions about the word of wisdom and stuff until like Prohibition era.
Yep.
Anyway,
That blew my mind too, realizing how many prophets were drinking whiskey.
yes.
And I was like, that was fine for them to get into heaven.
Well,
Why
and
not
that
me?
but when the Constitution was amended and alcohol is legal again, the church is like, nah, we liked when it was illegal. So, word of wisdom, that thing that was just a health tip, Brother Brigham and Joseph, they were all drinking beer and all these other things.
And the GNC even says not by way of commandment, which I don't know how you explain this. Like you literally cannot be with your family forever. There have been conference talks about it, drink coffee and how sad it is because you're not going to be with your family.
One cup of
coffee, and how is that not a commandment then?
Yeah, because it does beg the question. Joseph Smith, prophet of the Restoration, owned a bar, drank regularly, smoked tobacco, all of those things. And then he was the one who ushered in the Restoration. Obviously, pretty righteous dude, according to Mormons, have all these revelations funneled through him. He was able to do that with ingesting all of the things that now would take away the spirit. So that sounds like it was a big shelf item, trying to figure out what was actually a commandment and what you should be able to do.
Yeah, or what they made us think that we should do. Because even like for a long time, they were instructing women that you had to wear the garment underneath your bra, which like bras aren't made to fit over the garment. And so many women are walking around thinking, I have to wear the garment against my chest with the bra over top of it or whatever. And then they like changed it at some point and never told the people who had already gone through and and learned it differently.
Mm-hmm.
And so the younger generation were told that you can wear your bra underneath the garment, but they never make an announcement. So there are tons of people walking around uncomfortable. And they don't even know better.
Right.
Like that just irritates me. And then they changed it. So as of October 2019, that garment question says, do you keep the covenants that you made in the temple, including wearing the temple garment as instructed in the endowment? So it still implies that you made a covenant to wear it, but at least it just says as instructed instead of day and night, which maybe leaves a little bit more wiggle room for people. But it's just interesting when they make changes like that and you wonder
what prompted that.
Yeah, why?
Why are there ever changes? If the endowment came from God, as Joseph Smith said it did, why aren't we doing the same thing that he did? Why isn't W.W. Phelps, today's version of W.W. Phelps, dressed up as Lucifer in a snake costume, dancing around and singing? We're getting robbed from the real endowment because of the new revelations, changes.
And why aren't they, including the penalties or whatever, like slitting your throat and bowels or whatever? Like if that was inspired, where did it go? Did God change his mind? Do those penalties still apply to them and not to me? Or do they apply to me as well and I just don't know it? Like,
yeah,
these are the questions I had.
Yeah. And I know a lot of Mormons who, when those changes are made, they feel so much comfort because like, oh, I'm so glad that the prophet, we are led by a prophet who is changing, becoming more progressive, making women not have to, veil their faces in the temple or covenant to their husband as he covenants with the Father. Aren't we so blessed? And as soon as those types of changes were happening, it started when I was starting to recognize those things and be like, wait. That makes me feel less secure in the prophet of why it was so sexist to begin with.
Right.
Yes.
Like, I take no comfort in that, actually.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's hard for me to understand. And then a big thing for me was in August of 2018, Matt's brother came out. And that had a big impact on me.
Came out as gay.
Yeah. I just knew that wasn't something that he chose. I had known him since he was like 12 or 13 when I met Matt. And
It's interesting
yeah.
how my perspective of LGBTQ individuals has completely changed in just, a handful of years. When I was vehemently opposed to, Prop 8 and all of that. But I didn't really have any openly gay people in my life. So it was easy to condemn, to reject, an idea, a concept, but there was no face to it. But that changed with my brother. And I had known that he'd had a really difficult time growing up in the church.
What age did he come out?
After his mission.
Okay, so he served a mission and he
Yeah.
was okay.
Really, yeah.
I don't know how old he was when he came out, but I'm so proud of him, and it breaks my heart that he suffered so much trying to fit that one cookie cutter mold
Yeah.
that he's supposed to be, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's easy for the church to just say, well, the only authorized sexual relationship is between a man and a woman who are married. But by saying that, you're telling anyone who's not interested in that kind of relationship that they have to live and die alone. Companionship, you're not going to have it. That's for the next life, if you can make it. And that's just completely unacceptable to me. And so that really changed things for me.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of my heroes for what he did.
I agree.
I can't imagine being LGBTQ in Utah, in a Mormon family. I can't imagine what it's like, because as Stephanie said, it's not like, who would choose to be rejected by everyone around them, to be told that they're defective or evil or their desires are wrong. The conversation about LGBTQ many times focuses on, sexuality.
Yeah.
And reduces it to
sexual
conduct.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
But that never happens when you're talking about a heterosexual couple.
Yep.
It's like, oh, what do you guys like to do together? And what do you find attractive about that person?
Where do you travel? How many kids do you have, or whatever? My hairdresser is LGBT. She's lesbian, and she pointed that out to me too, and it's true. And like I've noticed that and stopped doing it, and started to see members of the LGBTQ community as like whole individuals, and when they have a relationship with someone, like what percentage of your relationship is even sexual? Do you know what I mean? There's so much more to a relationship. And I think when I realized that too, it gave me a lot more empathy for people who, like, how can we expect them to not just go without like sexual acts, but to go without companionship and a life partner and someone that they want to
confide in
Yes.
and suffer through difficulties
Yes.
with.
Because like I don't know what I would do without Matt. I'm serious though.
That's
Like
recorded for eternity.
I know, but he's my person. And like whenever I'm going through something hard, like he's the person I go to, and having that, I just can't imagine withholding that from someone.
But I quickly became convinced, especially with my brother coming out, that no one would ever choose to have a life of rejection. It's not a choice.
Yeah.
And they are wonderful the way they are. We don't need to change people. We need to embrace them for who they are and support them in the path that they want to pursue.
And thank goodness there are differences. Life would be so boring if everybody was the same, And I really, really appreciate that now more than ever.
So were you able to have a lot of these thoughts like while you were still faithful believers in the church, or does it take you a long time to get there? What was your first reaction?
I think as soon as Matt's brother came out, I was already working toward it, I think, becoming more empathetic. I think pretty quickly after that, I started feeling like I still believed in the church, but they were wrong on this issue. And then I was like trying to make that fit somehow.
So then what happened?
So then they reversed the policy in April 2019. And I immediately knew then that they had been wrong about that and that I had disregarded my own moral compass in favor of following the prophet. I defended that policy, even if it was most of the time in my head, right? Like I made excuses for that policy and again, disregarded my own intuition and what felt right to me in favor of following the prophet. And I vowed in that moment that would never happen again. I was going to listen to myself. And then I thought, like, if they were wrong about that, what else have they been wrong about?
That is a dangerous question.
That
to
is
think,
that
isn't
is the
it?
road to apostasy.
Yep.
Because I was just thinking, for me, I had similar feelings as well, because you start off with the idea that we are spirit children in heaven. God doesn't make mistakes. There are two genders, male and female. God puts us in these bodies. So you must have started to go down a path of, why are people gay? Why would God curse people to be alone for forever?
Yep.
There's just so many questions when it comes to the science and knowledge and empathy that we are coming to understand about LGBTQ people that doesn't align with something that was born out of the 19th century and then, earlier than that. And it just, as we move forward, these two colliding ideas about human beings that are going to be a good significant portion of the population that can't achieve exaltation.
Right.
What do we
Yeah.
do with these God's children that we know we love, are righteous, that are trying to everything that they do, that are being told to beat themselves bloody, to show up better dead chaste than alive unchaste, like you were
Yes.
saying earlier,
Yeah.
like trying to fit these two ideas in your head and
Uh-huh.
then just leading you down a road of questions on top of questions. So what type of questions did you have from there?
It's interesting. I feel like, thinking about my journey again, it's like love and empathy led me out of the church. And like as soon as I started feeling empathy for the LGBTQ community and love for people, and I started thinking about all the amazing people who aren't Mormon and who will never be Mormon or never even hear about it, and I started thinking, I started believing basically that you don't need to be Mormon to go to heaven.
Yeah, if God is a decent person.
Yeah. I was like, anyone who's a good person is going to go to heaven, basically, is what I started believing. And then I was like, well, if they don't need the church, then why do I need the church? Because this is like painful and, they're hurting people. And anyway, so yeah, I started when I had that thought of like, if they're wrong about this, what else have they been wrong about? Then I started researching. I think I read like Letter for My Wife first.
How did you first find that?
Facebook group?
I think so. I think it was, and I think it's like an expired group, but I used to be in like the Exponent group. It was like feminist Mormon women, but like a lot of the women were on their way out or ex-Mormon. I think maybe someone mentioned it there, or I was just researching something, Googling something, and it came up. But it is interesting that whenever you Google anything like negative, I mean, probably or positive about the church, but definitely negative. Like the first 3 or 4 links are from the church,
Sponsored
paid.
links from the church.
Church sources sponsored. Yeah. But anyway, so yeah, I started doing some research and I would like bring up issues with Matt occasionally, just like, oh, did you know about this? Or did you know about this? Big shelf items for me were like the Book of Abraham. Discovering that was not that the papyrus didn't say what Joseph Smith
Is that
said
something that you
said.
first like learned about reading in Letter from My Wife? For those of you who aren't familiar, it's similar to the CES letter. It has a collection of some of the most problematic truth claims of the church with links and evidence. And it's also it actually has an audio, like a recording you can listen to on Spotify as well if you don't like reading long documents.
Mhm.
So was that the first time that you read a lot of those things? And it kinda, like, shook
I
your
think
world?
that was in Letter from My Wife. And then he talked about the Kinderhook plates, Joseph Smith claiming to translate them. It turns out they were made up and didn't actually say anything. And Joseph Smith was even claiming that they were buried with some guy named Ham or something, right?
A descendant of Ham.
Oh, a descendant of Ham. Anyway, so I told Matt about that. And I was like, did you know about this? Did you know about this? And
Matt, had you known about any of that?
I had never heard of the Kinderhook plates.
What about Book of Abraham problems?
I don't think I had heard about problems with it. I guarantee on my mission, I told everyone this is, ancient Egyptian that was translated, whatever.
yeah.
The word of God,
And I'm trying to
not
remember.
stolen from the Bible.
I feel like it was hit or miss with Matt as far as how he would respond. Sometimes he would be like, wow, that's weird. And he would research it a little bit. And other times he would get defensive of the church, I would say.
Yeah, because I was still pretty in.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Were
I
you-
mean,
did you both have callings?
I'm trying to remember at this time. I might have been without a calling because I had
Yeah,
asked
because
to
you
be
had asked to be
released.
released.
Yeah. But I think you had some calling, I think. Can't remember what it was, but
Was I not in the bishopric?
you might have actually, I think you were in the bishopric around this time, but which was hard because I was trying to get 3 little kids under the age of like 4 to church by myself.
Yeah,
every
because I had
morning.
early morning meetings, and then
Again, ridiculous.
so
Yeah.
so she's like single parenting at a church that she doesn't really believe in anymore.
Trying to get my kids to a church that that I'm starting to lose faith in for sure. I was like trying, I think I was worried. Like I don't know, as I was going on this journey, Matt was supportive. Like I remember him telling me, and this is like to Matt's credit for sure, but I remember him telling me, I'm really proud of you for like doing what you feel is right. Even though he still was like, I believe in the Book of Mormon, like the church is true. He was pretty supportive of me on my journey, but I was worried that like the more studying I did, the more I felt like the church was really toxic and was a toxic high demand religion, we'll say. And was starting to feel like I don't really want my kids to be raised in this. And I just felt like our ideas were just diverging so much that I was worried it would be hard to maintain that long term. But at the same time, maybe we could have done it because Matt was so supportive. But there was. Should I tell him the funny story or do you want to talk more about the issues first?
What funny story? About me getting released?
About me, you threatening.
Oh,
something.
sure, yeah. And then
You
and
threatening
then I
is
can
always
tell.
a fun.
Then I can talk
Sounds
about
fun.
my
Oh,
apostasy.
well.
You don't want to?
No, I do. I've just, maybe we'll wait. So I saw that video.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. I saw that video of Holland on BBC, his interview where he lied, flat out lied, and was caught in the lie.
We can reenact it. I have that entire thing memorized.
Let's do it.
He says, Mitt Romney could potentially become the next president of the United States. It's on my understanding that in the Mormon temple, he would have sworn an oath to take his own life, lest he reveal the secrets of the Mormon temple.
You really did
Is
memorize
that true?
it?
Seriously, because then Holland says,
That is not true.
No,
That is-
he said no.
no.
We do not have penalties in the temple.
And he's like, but you did, and you
But
would have
prior to 1990, you
Like,
did.
yeah, we used to,
Yeah,
but not anymore.
Yeah, and he gets really awkward. Like, oh, you caught me in my. I was trying to be manipulative, and
Right.
yeah,
Got caught in the lie.
yeah,
Mhm.
answer a different question than the one you asked, right?
We used to.
And
Yeah.
the strengthening members committee
Yeah,
Did they mention that? in
that
the BBC
scared
documentary?
the hell
they
out
asked
of me.
Holland about it.
Yeah, it's part of that interview.
Yeah,
And there's like a guy in that interview where he asked them directly, I think, right? Like, is
So-
there a strengthening members committee? And he's like trying to answer it without knowing that there is
Yes,
one, without
yeah.
confirming or denying. And he's like,
and he's like, no,
I
I
gotta
know
go.
there is one, and he's like, well, yeah, we do, but I don't know anything about it. Like, well, first you said there wasn't one. Now you're saying you don't know anything about it. It
Okay,
was just
so
really
so
deceptive.
for those who don't know, and again, I don't have all the details about what this committee really does, but my understanding is there's an apostle or two who are assigned to the committee because they have all kinds of committees that the apostles are assigned to. And, beneath them are a bunch of detectives, snoops, people who I'm assuming they're actually on the church's payroll and they do it as a job rather than a calling, but they go online and gather information against people who are speaking out against the church. And they compile the data and will then deliver it to that person's local church leader with sometimes a command or at least a suggestion that this person needs to be talked to.
And
I am not making this up.
Threatened with
Yeah.
excommunication.
This is real because there are you go and watch any of the excommunication proceedings on YouTube, and you'll see they have this dossier with all kinds of screenshots, and someone did a lot of work to find the evidence to use against this person in the excommunication hearing, and it's shocking.
Yeah. What's their names? That couple in Ohio that got excommunicated for their support group?
Leah and Cody.
Yeah,
Young.
I think they talk about it in their Mormon Stories interview about the strengthening members committee being involved in their excommunication.
Yeah, somebody's got a file on me or sent it to TikTok and got me booted this week. That's how I know. It's too suspicious.
Poor Carah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you watched the video.
Yeah, so
What broke the shelf?
that's a good question because I was like afraid to. It's like the shelf was falling down, and I was like, no, don't fall. I like holding it up with one hand, and then because I was afraid of like the effect that would have on our marriage to like fully let it fall. Like I joined Waters of Mormon Facebook group, which is for people who are like more nuanced but want to
Try to make it
stay involved
yeah.
in the church basically. And I was trying to like make every excuse or like view it differently. Like, oh, it wasn't really a translation. It was a translation, So I was kind of clinging to things. So it's hard for me to like, it's almost like it was broken and I was holding it up there until later. But
Sorry, I just wanted to ask, did you have to keep it holding on from a string, thinking that like Matt would leave you, that it would just your entire marriage, everything would be gone? Or did you feel like he would have been just as supportive as he'd been up to that point? What was the implication for your marriage?
I
you
don't
thought
think
might happen?
I don't think I thought Matt was gonna like if I said, "Oh, I don't want to go to church anymore," because I kind of wasn't going anymore or very
You
often.
had a lot of health issues at that time too.
Yeah, and the 3 kids, and you were in the bishopric, and so we just didn't make it very often. But I wasn't worried about him just leaving me, but I was worried that it would drive a wedge between us. Like we would just the difference in beliefs would just be so much that it would be hard to like I don't know, just because we're so close and we talk so much. And I was just worried that our views would be so different that we wouldn't be able to reconcile it, I guess.
Well, yeah, because once your eyes are open, you can't unsee.
And it's
what you
hard to
saw.
watch your spouse not have their eyes open. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And
Painful.
especially when I know when I was going through this with my husband and one person wants to pay tithing and the other person doesn't.
Yep, we went through that too.
So yeah, fun story about that. I thought we were paying tithing, but she had stopped. So every bad thing that happened in
You're
that
welcome.
in that 6-month period,
And she put it into a
Was
secret
because-
fund
was
and the money
because of
made me
that.
feel much better. No, I'm kidding. Sorry, say that again.
So when are you gonna tell your?
You're
Because I'm still
leaving us-
trying to
Okay.
save the eternal life of our family, right?
Yeah.
So I'm in the bishopric, and
He thinks we're paying tithing, but I couldn't stomach it when they came out with the $100 billion fund thing.
and
like,
they
"We have student
explained why they didn't come out with it.
Yeah, they said we didn't want people to know about all the money we had because we wanted them to keep giving us more money.
because they needed the blessings.
That's essentially what they said. No,
Yep.
like I'm not even joking. Go look it up.
Yeah.
The finance guy or whatever, that's what he said. But okay, so I watched that Holland video. This is kind of a fun story. And we are really good friends with our next door neighbors. And he was a high counselor at the time on the high council, which sounds so Handmaid's Tale, by the way. But anyway, she and I were hanging out, went out to dinner, and we were sitting in the car chatting. And I told her that I was having some doubts about the church. And I showed her the Holland video. And she went home and read the CES letter and then left the church in a week. Before me, she was just like, I'm out, no more. And I was still kind of in that stage of trying to hold on a little bit for Matt. But it was fun because we'd have them over to hang out and we would debate about church stuff. Matt and I really like to debate each other. It's pretty fun.
And our friends would just sit there and eat snacks and watch us.
They would interject and, but it is kind of a funny joke that we have that they watch us fight all the time. But, but yeah, so we would have fun debates about the church and stuff. My friend and I against our husbands. And I remember at this time talking to my brother a lot on the phone and he was always like, oh, Matt will see it. Matt will come around.
Her brother's so awesome, by the way.
Yeah, he paved the way for me to leave, and he's just the best brother ever. Huge support, calls me all the time.
But very, very patient in allowing Stephanie to discover it herself.
Mm-hmm.
Because for people who have left, you know what I'm talking about when I say it's like when you get your testimony, you want to go share it with everyone. And so when you find out, what's behind the curtain, you want to tell everyone because most of the people in your life
don't know
about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I immediately started, as soon as I started having doubts, I started posting stuff on Facebook that was a little controversial and I'm sure, got unfriended and unfollowed and whatever else. But I felt that feeling of I want to share the truth that I've learned. And so other people know. You really do feel it feels like the Truman Show when you find out that the reality you thought you had is not reality. and everyone around you is like walking around as if it's reality, and you're like, no, wake up. Like there's this whole world out there and we're living in a cage, and like, here's the key, please open it. And most people don't want the key, which is hard.
But understandable.
Yeah, it's because it's scary. It really
'Cause
is.
we were all
scary.
there at one point. You
Yep.
could have told me anything.
Well,
I would have listened to it.
and you don't want to be the guy that is, condemned in the scriptures for not enduring to the end or being deceived by Satan in the last days. You don't want to be that guy.
Yeah.
You don't want to fulfill prophecy in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You want to be on the right path.
And then I remember like in April 2020, they had conference right at the beginning of the pandemic, and they had their huge conference planned, right? And then they had to change everything. And Nelson said, like, admitted that he didn't know about the pandemic, when everyone was saying like, oh, he knew, he said this conference was going to be unlike any other, and then it ended up being like all about Joseph Smith. And that's when they did like the Hosanna shout and stuff for the new proclamation about Joseph Smith and the first vision and stuff.
And the new logo.
Oh, and the new logo. And it was just like, it was in such bad taste when we're in the middle of a worldwide pandemic.
At the very beginning of it, when no one really knew what was going on,
Everyone's
when you
in
need
lockdown.
spiritual guidance in the world.
Yeah.
Like, look at this nifty new logo we have.
So is that when
Of
did
immodest
that start to bother
Jesus.
you at that point,Tt, that you were starting to be?
So
this
at
is
that
taking
point,
us up to 2020?
I was desperate to have a positive experience with General Conference. And I remember specifically talking to a person in my family afterward and saying, I couldn't be more disappointed with what I heard. That is not what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear a proposal to organize our efforts to help people with the pandemic, or I wanted, something, but it was so tone deaf. It's like I wrote my talk 3 months ago and
I can't change it.
everything went to hell, but I'm not going to say anything different. So
now.
you're like, are you even in the same world that we're in? So it really bothered me, but the lead up to that was similar in many ways to Stephanie's, the policy of exclusion and the change that bothered me. I remember going to a leadership conference for state, one of the state conference was happening. We had a member of the 70 come, and there was a question and answer period. And so someone asked the question, explain this whole policy versus doctrine thing, right? Because that became this huge debate. And to this day, I've never met someone who can actually explain the difference.
Yep.
Because there are so many contradictions in church history about it.
Policy is inspired too. And so it's like, if the policy came from God, then it's pretty much the same as doctrine.
Right. But the church's position is that it's okay for prophets to screw up on policy, not doctrine.
But then they can rename anything they want as policy.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, so what I did not know is about Nelson's talk at BYU Hawaii in 2016. So the policy was in place. It hadn't been reversed yet. Nelson, who's president of the Quorum of the 12 at the time, goes to BYU Hawaii, gives a talk. And if you guys haven't seen it, go watch it. Or at least go read the segment that I'm about to tell you about.
Mm-hmm.
So he talks about how God speaks to his prophets and how revelation is received. And he gives a few examples. And one of the examples he gives is the 2015 policy. And he details, he said, after the Supreme Court issued their ruling, we were very troubled about that and wanted to figure out how to deal with that going forward. And he said that they as a quorum and as the first presidency, all 15 of them met regularly in the temple. They fasted, they prayed. And he said, and eventually we saw the will of the Lord made manifest through his prophet, Thomas Monson, announcing this policy. And the Holy Ghost confirmed that this was
All
from
of us,
God.
all 15 of us. Yep.
And then he says, this is how God works through his prophets. So all 15 of them were on board and supposedly had the Holy Spirit confirm to them that it was God's will. And then they reverse it 18 months later. And I had a really hard time with that, because that defeats this whole policy versus doctrine thing, because we're talking about how you receive revelation. And he and all the others were convinced that this was revelation, but it wasn't. And everyone knows it. So if the professional prophets, all 15 of them, get something wrong, again, what else are they getting wrong? And I had at that moment, I had to consider the possibility that it wasn't the one true church. Because, Nelson has this little video where he's talking to a bunch of kids, and I can't remember her name. She's in the general primary presidency at the time.
Yeah.
If you want to see a disturbing video, go watch that, where he is asked by this woman, would you ever lead these children astray? He says, no, of course not.
Never.
God has said that if I tried to lead the people astray, that he would take me away. And I want to stay here for a long time. So the takeaway from that is, as long as the prophet's alive and not stricken dead immediately, whatever he tells you to do is God's will. And you can't go wrong following the prophet. So I start struggling with all these things, and Steph has these health issues, and it becomes just too much to be in the bishopric anymore. So I tell the bishop, and he had known the different things I was struggling with, so I don't think he was too surprised. But I said I needed to be released, and so the time came for the formal meeting to release me, and the high counselor assigned to our ward comes and does it. And he comes in, I invite him in my home, and we sit down at the table, and he starts asking me, how you doing? And I explained, we're going through all these things. Work's really stressful. Steph has all these health issues. I'm having some doubts about some church things. And he immediately latches onto that, right? Like the temporal stuff doesn't matter. We don't need to worry about that. It's the spiritual stuff that I need to fix. And he's a hardcore by the book Mormon, former mission president, former stake presidency at least, and he just is like I said, by the book. And so he says, well, what kinds of things are you struggling with? And so I walk him through the policy of exclusion, thing and the reversal. And I said, so Nelson said that was from God, but then they reversed it. And so I'm having a hard time answering the question, do you sustain Russell Nelson as prophet, seer, and revelator? I said, I'm just being honest. I don't know if I can do that. And I said, I don't know when he's speaking for God, because I am not given the ability to, or the permission, the discretion to think for myself and arrive at a different answer than the answer the prophet is telling me to arrive at. That's not allowed. I can have my own private opinions, but again, I need to side with Nelson no matter what. And so I explained that to him, and he said, well, it's easy to know when the prophet is speaking or what speaking for God. And I said, okay, tell me the secret. And he says, always. And this is a smart guy. And I said, wait a second. You're saying everything this guy says is God's will? And he says, yes. So being a core horror lawyer that I am, I came up with a hypothetical situation. And I said, okay, so at next general conference, if President Nelson gets up at the podium and says, I've received a revelation, I want every member in the United States to gather on the southern border of the United States, bring all of your guns and your food and everything. We are going to invade the nation of Mexico. Take it over in the name of the church. What would you do? And I kid you not, he said to me with a straight face, God's done stuff like that before. I was speechless.
Which is freaky when you think about it, because, I mean, there are probably a lot of members like that would literally do anything. Drink the Kool-Aid, jump off a cliff. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, we know from just church history, people commit, serious crimes. They destroy printing presses. They kill people.
Native Americans, that's a huge issue that I've just recently become aware of.
Yeah. And so after going through that experience, Stephanie then shows me this video on YouTube where members of all these different faiths, different denominations within Christianity, but also outside of Christianity.
And even like really unhealthy cults.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, they're all bearing their testimony. I can't remember what the video is called, but people should watch it.
Yeah, witnesses or something. Yeah.
And they're all just bearing testimony that their group or their church is the one true faith, and they know that God has revealed that to them. And when you listen, they are just as sincere as anyone you would see at a fast and testimony meeting. So I watched that and I think, okay, clearly they all can't be right. How do I know that my feelings
are more
are
valid,
legitimate and theirs are just made up?
Yep.
And so then at that point, you have to again consider the possibility that you're not in the one true faith, that you didn't win the spiritual lottery of being born into the one true faith in the very last days. And we know it's not because of righteousness in the premortal life, because the church has effectively disavowed that teaching by disavowing the teaching that African Americans were less valiant in the premortal life. So this idea of, being born into the one true faith because I was righteous in the premortal life, I don't buy that at all. I think I was born in Utah, born into the Mormon church, but that's not because of something I did in the premortal life. Anyway, so I watched that video. I come to the conclusion that, okay, I'm convinced that the prophets are not always right. And these guys are convinced that they're right. So I need to rely on actual evidence at this point, because feelings alone are not enough. Yep. Witnesses by the Spirit are not enough, because every one of these people in this video are having the same experience.
Especially, that must be really shocking to your system. That would be to mine if somebody that I trusted as a spiritual leader says it's okay to commit atrocities in the name of our God, because ours is the right one.
Mm-hmm.
When you sounds like you're coming to terms with, a lot of people think their God is the right one, and a lot of people commit atrocities in the name of their God. And I'm not so confident that I want to be in this crew.
Yes.
Right. So at that point, my shelf was getting weak, and Stephanie knew that. And so she said, check out the CES letter. And I read it with skepticism, because I wanted the church to be true. Because it has its problems, but it has a good fairy tale ending, right?
You think you know a lot of things. And that's comforting.
Right.
To think you
To
know
have
things.
to have answers,
Yeah.
to know where you're going and all these things.
Yeah, you'll see your loved ones again one day.
Right.
Everyone will get a chance to get the gospel taught to them in spirit prison one day.
Yep.
That God's got a plan for everybody.
Right. So there's a lot of it that's beautiful and appealing. But so I'm reading the CES letter, and there's some things I roll my eyes about, and others that I really get stuck on. The Kinderhook plates, I get the explanation that he didn't really translate it. Someone just said that he looked at it and might have said something about it, but he didn't really sit down and translate them, so that doesn't count. And I was desperate for a faithful response to the CES letter. And I searched hours for something to oppose it legitimately. And all I found were personal attacks veiled as scholarly attempts to address the claims of the CES letter.
And
And
do you
when
remember what website you were like what you first looked at?
What was his name?
Like Fair Mormon, or do you remember what?
Definitely
websites?
time on Fair Mormon, but there's a guy who's done a CES letter response.
Jim Bennett?
Yes.
Yeah, we've had him on Mormon Stories.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I read that and I read his, response, and I was disappointed. But again, most of it was, in my opinion, it was more personal attack than it was addressing the facts. But before, again, being a lawyer, before I would ever consider concluding that the church is not true and getting to a place where I would be willing to leave it, I would have to be convinced. I wouldn't do it if it's a 50-50 shot. It would have to be 100%. And I would have to know it through the church's own statements and documents. I'm not going to give any credit to someone's opinion online about, their interpretation of something. I want to see the actual documents. And so that's what I did. I had to dig into the essays. I had to dig
gospel
into
topic essays.
I had to go into some online libraries to find old documents and things and read the actual writing of the person. And after all of that, it became increasingly difficult to support the truth claims. And then Stephanie showed me some Brother Jake videos. And
Wait, so like during this wait. During this time I was like listening to
love you, Brother Jake.
Michael Coe. Yeah, it's true. He's awesome. Michael Coe's episode, the first one about like I think it might be empty. Try it out.
I think I'm okay.
About the archaeology and how there's just like no proof of the Book of Mormon in Northern or Southern America. Anyway, and just all the issues about horses and whatever. So I was listening to that and Grant Palmer's episode, and just a lot of things that were starting to convince me that the church was definitely not what it claimed to be.
Well, and there's a mountain of evidence.
Oh, tons. Because then, okay, so what happened was our neighbors were over one like weekend night or whatever, and there was a YouTube video called 50 Problems with the Mormon Church. And Matt goes, well, we got to watch this, thinking it's going to like spark some fun discussion, right? Debate with me.
And I can just shoot down all the problems, right?
Yeah, give all the apologist answers and all of that. And that video is just like so damning for the church because it has like quotes from church leaders and sorry.
That was audio listeners. That was Stephanie pouring water into a water bottle.
Oh yeah.
Just in case you're wondering.
I forget that not everyone will be seeing. Yeah. So he was like, yeah, we got to watch this. It has quotes from church leaders and it's just really damning. So we watched that. And after the first video, I think you were kind of like, oh, like I can't really defend that. And then there was 50 more problems with the Mormon church. So we watched that one as well. And then both Matt and our neighbor, who was a high counselor, were like, yeah, we're done.
Wow.
That was the moment it broke.
August 2020. And as soon as he was done, I was like, wow, I'm done too. And it was weird because even though I had been like out kind of for a while, I didn't fully let myself be out until Matt was out. And then I was like, had like the grieving stage or whatever.
The natural question I think people want to know though is like, so many people wish that their spouse or friend could get to that point. But you sounds like Matt that you were holding on for so long. And what is it about that video, or just was it the overwhelming avalanche of too many things you couldn't excuse anymore?
Yeah, it wasn't one fact. It was hundreds of verified facts that I found by reading, the CES letter and all these other things.
And resources.
And then
yeah.
just nothing to counter it. And I'm okay with having faith, but I need to have some evidence to support that faith. And my last stronghold was the Book of Mormon, because every time I read that book, I felt good, and it inspires me to be like Jesus. And if something is inspiring me to be like Jesus, it can't be from the devil, as the Book of Mormon says. So it must be from God. And
Yep.
and
Yeah, that's serious.
right. And so that was the last thing that I really struggled to let go of, just my experience, my testimony
I remember that.
of it.
Mhm.
But again, reading all the evidence about the Book of Mormon and the complete lack of evidence to support it, it was too much to ignore.
We always get the comments from, faithful Mormon listeners who will say like, okay, so there's just questions that won't be answered in this lifetime. You've covenanted in the temple to obey these things. You felt the spirit. Why can't you just like press forward in faith and these answers will be given to you in the next life?
Because I was deceived. I think it's interesting that, those who believe in Jesus in the Bible, Jesus warns about false prophets in the last days. And I'm thinking, assuming that he really said that they will be ravenous wolves in sheep's clothing, why would he take the time to make a statement like that if it was going to be something on a small scale? Your David Koreshes of the world. Do we really think that that's who he's talking about? Or could he be talking about a church that is based on a book that no one else believes in, that there's no evidence it's legitimate, and that demands so much of its people, but ultimately demands allegiance to the prophet instead of God? There's no room for me to receive revelation from God. The Holy Ghost is worthless to me as a member of the church, because
You're told what to do, and any other answer is unacceptable.
exactly. So, yeah, I can use the Holy Ghost to remind me of something, or these little things that don't really matter that much. But getting revelation about some doctrine,
Some serious.
I am not
thing, yeah.
entitled to do that. And if I get an answer that is different than the prophet, I am wrong. And so I have to suppress and like deny my own conscience in favor of this man who has demonstrated that he doesn't speak for God. And at that point, there's no way for me to believe that it's the true church. They're always behind in the major issues. They're reactionary. I don't see any evidence that Nelson is actually a prophet. What has he prophesied about? Same with Monson. I mean, the most I've seen out of them is the fight over the use of the word Mormon. And one of them's working for the devil, apparently, and achieving victories for him. So again, I don't expect any human being to be perfect, but if you're going to be the prophet, you better not be giving false prophecies. Yeah. You better not be leading us astray, which is what they did. But they said that God won't let them lead us astray. So it's just a complete mess of contradictions.
Well, and like
God and deception.
God told them to exclude the children of LGBTQ people, which is like punishing the children for the quote unquote sins of their parents. But also, like, God gave you revelation about that, but didn't warn you about the pandemic, so you could, like, I don't know, tell people about it beforehand. Right. You know what I mean?
Anyway, so I ultimately made the decision. I'm done, and I told my bishop, and we were just like texting back and forth, and he basically, like, you know, bore his testimony to me, and, you know, said, I'm here for you, whatever. It was not a negative exchange. But that was kind of it. It was much easier to leave because of the pandemic.
So you're saying this was August
of 2020.
Okay.
So I don't even remember if they were, I think at that time they had started going back on like shifts or something. There's a certain amount of people who could go once a month. Your
last name started with this, then you went at this
time or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it was around then when people were really scared of COVID and had legitimate reasons to not go. And it was pretty common, if you get on social media at the time, pretty common to find people actually enjoying their Sundays and feeling happier without church. And of course, Bednar gave his little talk at BYU to kind of rally the troops to get people back to church. But it was, again, the pandemic, as horrible as it has been, it really was a great opportunity for us to distance ourselves, to see what life is like outside of the church without having being ostracized by members, because for all they know, we're still active.
Well, and I heard so many TBMs during that time saying, like, they didn't want to go back to church.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like
we had family members say that to us.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, well,
don't. But it's not an option.
Yeah.
It's not an option, especially because in Utah, your entire life can easily revolve around the church. Your employer, your coworkers, chances are many of them are active Mormons. Our government, local government, is controlled by the Mormon Church because there are so many active Mormons who actually meet with leaders of the church before the legislative session starts, and the school boards and the teachers. It is everywhere.
It's everywhere.
And if you're in a position where you believe it's no longer true, you have a really tough decision to make. Because, again, this is hard everywhere, I'm sure, but if you are in Utah, your life is about to change in a way that you cannot fully anticipate. And it will be devastating in many ways, heartbreaking. And there were a few times where I questioned whether I should leave. Can I find a way to keep the community and kind of pretend that, I believe, but I can't, because every time I go to church, I'm going to hear things that I know that are completely false. And those things are going to be taught to my children. They're going to be taught to my friends and my neighbors and their children. And I cannot be a part of continuing the perpetuation of that lie. So we had to make a clean break, but it resulted in a lot of lost friends, changes to family relationships. And I don't fault any of them. I really don't. Because when you're active Mormon and you hear that someone leaves the church, it's not, I don't think it's a natural response to just say, oh, I'm going to go over there and talk to them, see how they're doing. I think the natural response is, I have no clue what to do with this relationship anymore.
Yeah.
Because by leaving the church, you're basically, well, people interpret that as giving them the middle finger, telling them that you reject them.
Yeah, it becomes their identity.
And so it just instantly severs you from most of those relationships.
Right.
And you have some of those true friends who will do anything for you, who will support you in the faith journey, who will remain your friend, even though they are still active member and believe, and I'm on Mormon Stories podcast. You know, those people are few and far between, but they exist. And
I mean, thankfully our neighbors left with us. That made it a lot easier as well, having like friends that were in the same boat.
Yeah,
as
and
us.
your brother.
And my brother. That was a huge thing too. Can I tell the funny story now?
Yeah.
Because I kind of missed the timeline part, but this was a little earlier, like kind of when Matt was nuanced, but yeah, still in believing in the Book of Mormon. So I told Matt that I wanted to try alcohol, and I had never tried alcohol in my whole life. 32 years old or whatever, 31, I guess at the time. And so I was like, I'd like to try drinking alcohol and see if I like it. And
did you say to see if it will help you with something, or was it just? I thought it was. You thought it would help you with something.
I don't know, but we already had like a coffee maker, I think, at that point, didn't we?
No.
Or maybe not. Maybe not yet.
I would not have allowed that.
That's right. Okay, so Matt said to me, you can drink somewhere else, basically like what you do outside of the home is like your business, but if you bring alcohol into this house, I will move out.
Boom.
So
The spirit can't reside if there's
don't defile my home.
So naturally, being the very submissive wife that I am, I hopped in my minivan and I drove to the liquor store and bought some vodka. I'd never had alcohol in my whole life. Came home and made like a Moscow Mule or something. Had a couple shots and passed out on the couch.
And I was upstairs
the whole time. He had no idea. He comes downstairs and I'm like, and he just laughed, went to bed, and he didn't leave. So
it's true. Chickened out.
Yeah, we have like totally unrelated. We have a daughter who's very stubborn and defiant, and we have no idea where she got it from. But
yeah, but so that's kind of, the journey that we had today. I can honestly say that I am very happy that we have gone through this process, especially together. Again, it's been challenging, it's been painful, but I know that it was the right choice for us. And if I thought that it was the wrong choice, I would go back. I'm it's like an economic decision. What is going to give me the greatest level of happiness? Mm-hmm. And I'm pursuing that right now.
Yep.
And I get to experience life
and spend time with our kids. And just the fact that you double the amount of weekend time that you get in your lifetime.
No more callings.
Yes.
Sundays are amazing.
Weeknight stuff.
Best day of the week.
Amazing. I remember being like really scared of losing or of like parenting after Mormonism, you know?
Yeah.
And like where
will you go? What will you do?
Yeah, because my whole life I was like, well, I have to teach my kids all these morals or they're not going to be good people and I will have failed as a parent. So if I leave the church, like how am I going to raise my kids? Yeah, so I actually wrote kind of like a poem about it. We started an Instagram account shortly after Matt left, and at first it was anonymous. Because we weren't sure how much we wanted to out ourselves, and then we decided to make it, public and put our faces on it and stuff. There's been repercussions from that, but we didn't do it like people will comment and say like, "Oh, you're just so bitter, you're just spreading bitterness," but it's not that at all. It's actually like out of love. I feel like my hope for our Instagram account is that we'll be able to support people who are going through a faith transition. And also that when Mormons find our account, it will either like increase their informed consent about issues in the church so they at least know what some of the issues are, or B, at least increase their empathy for people who leave, realizing that there are major issues and there are reasons why people leave, and it's not just because they're lazy learners or whatever,
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll just read this. Oh. All right. So I'm not like an amazing poetry writer, but I just like sometimes it's nice to just get your feelings on paper, So it's called A Gift. It was a gift I didn't know I needed. It was a gift I didn't know my children needed. A gift that came from deconstructing my own beliefs. The gift of shredding that mental checklist. The one we have as Mormons for our children. The boxes checked determine our success as parents, their success as humans, their ability to be considered worthy. Worthy of what? Now it's blank slate parenting. It felt scary at first. Now I know it's exactly what I needed, what they needed, what we needed. They can be who they are. I guide them gently. They explore. I teach by example. We love others. We love each other. It's simple, really. So yeah, I think just
Beautiful.
like teaching our kids that to be kind, to treat other people the way that you would want to be treated.
It's not that complicated.
Yeah, you said it's pretty simple.
We think it's
Right.
so complicated in the church, but really what we're doing is creating this checklist for our kids that like, unless you do all these things, you're not worthy of my love or
Right.
like, and I have failed as a parent unless you do all these things. And it's just way too much pressure.
Yeah. Yeah. I think as a mom, I think we're the same age, 32.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And both have 3 kids, right?
Yeah.
Love you.
Twins.
And yeah, I think a lot of people are really afraid to leave when they have kids because it is like a good blueprint for how to raise a good human, at least in your head. That's what you think. But I don't know if you relate to this, but I realized it's just because I had so much I still had to deconstruct. I still held on to purity culture.
Oh, yeah.
I still was like, okay, well, I still have to teach them that don't have sex outside of marriage. I still have to
Yes.
teach them X, Y, and Z.
Yes.
And it's because I hadn't deconstructed that the chances are maybe one of my kids will be LGBTQ. How am I
Mhm.
going to feel about that?
Yes.
How am I going to feel if they, eventually experiment with drugs or alcohol? How am I going to treat them? What am I going to tell them about their maker and how they're viewed by their maker now? There's just, you have 100 things you still have to deconstruct, and it's so scary, but I hope it's accounts like yours and maybe mine if I get my TikTok back, but Mormon Stories podcast that just, help people realize it actually is, it's simple if you just take one step at a time, just deconstruct things, look at that Jenga piece, look at that puzzle piece, be like, is that true? Do I want to teach this principle I learned in Mormonism to my kids? Sometimes you keep it, sometimes you don't. You recognize, was that healthy for me? Is it healthy for other people? Is it based on evidence and empathy? You get to sort those things now in your marriage, in your life, and you get to live a life with a brain of your own,
and actually choose what you want to keep and what you want to throw away.
Yeah, like an actual authority that comes from here.
Yes.
Yes.
It's crazy.
I got a lantern ornament for the tree this year. Like every year we get ornaments for the kids that kind of represent things they love or something about their life that year. And I got a lantern because I've learned that I can like lead my, like I can be my own light and
Well, and lead our family.
yeah, lead myself and our family with my heart, you know. The LGBTQ comment reminded me that like a big thing for me was, what if one of my kids is LGBTQ and their risk of suicide increases so much if they're a member of the church? So how can I be part of an organization that increases the risk of my child committing suicide? Like, I don't know who my kids are yet. It's very likely that one of them
And you
will
never know
be
until they tell you.
LGBTQ. Yeah. And I just couldn't be a part of an organization that would potentially harm my children that way.
Yeah, we're all going to need therapy for something. I fully
Okay.
accept that everyone should be going to therapy for something. We all have things traumas, things people were conditioned to do to us because of their, generational trauma or whatever.
Yes.
But the things that we can minimize when your eyes are open to them,
Uh-huh.
don't put your kids in that situation anymore. And it's really hard to take your kids back to church after you recognize that.
Uh-huh.
Really hard. Even if you're like, I don't have another blueprint, but it's true that John likes to say when we go to like faith retreat workshops and things, he'll say that even if the church is an unhealthy structure, if you leave and you have no structure, that's still worse than an unhealthy one. But as soon as you recognize the unhealthy one, you have to figure out how you're going to rebuild. And so that's what I'm interested in. The next part of the story is how did you guys rebuild? What have you decided for your family? Where has your faith taken you? Did you investigate Christianity? Where is your faith now? And what do you hope for your family moving forward?
It's still a journey.
Yeah, I would just address too that like when we came out on our Instagram account and also like told our families that we had left the church, we had, mixed reactions. When my dad found our Instagram account, he texted me and called me Satan / a daughter of perdition and then blocked my number. So,
Yikes.
I mean, I don't hold bitterness toward my dad because I feel like there's some sort of trauma or mental illness or something there. But I don't also know how to hold boundaries, and so he's not involved in our lives anymore. But but it's just interesting that like that was his reaction, and that's a common reaction, I think, for a lot of people. Like, oh, you're speaking out against the church. Like, I want nothing to do with you. You're core horror, right? Like Elder Nielsen said today or whatever. And then like on the other hand, my mom was super supportive and was, she's like, I love you no matter what. And I have tons of family that aren't members and they have happy lives and raise good kids. And she's even listened to my issues with the church, and I can talk to her about anything. My mom's incredible. And
yeah, and your stepdad is too.
And yep, my stepdad stepped up and he's been a great dad
And
grandpa.
I don't feel like they've treated us different.
No, not at all. So
great.
Yeah, I feel like there are some Mormons that just like get it right. I've had friends say that are more active Mormons be like, I just want you to know that I am still your friend and I don't feel differently about you just because you've left the church or whatever. So,
well, what about speaking out like publicly, coming on this podcast, or what ramifications come from this or your Instagram account? Because there are a lot of people who are like, you can leave, but shut up about it.
Oh yeah, sit down and be quiet. Yeah.
I'll probably lose my job. No.
We laugh so we don't cry.
Yeah, exactly. So it's scary. I again, I have no idea what it's like to be LGBTQ in Utah, and I don't want to say anything to minimize what they go through, but I think in some small way, coming out publicly in a strong way against the Mormon Church has some similarities, and
sharing a part of yourself that feels really vulnerable and
Yeah, you're saying this is who I am,
Yeah.
this is what I believe, and it's something that's condemned by most of the people around me. And
Take it or leave it, and a lot of people leave it, you know.
right. But I find myself now trying to find empathy, understanding for people who are all in on the church and allowing them the space to live the way they want to live.
Maybe on their own journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as much as I want to, pry the eyelids open, that wouldn't have worked for me. It didn't work for me.
Yeah. Just takes
Everyone
time.
has to get there on their own. And, you have your own experiences that drive you there. And if you arrive there, great. If you enjoy Mormonism, I just hope that you have all the information. But if it works for you, fine. But if you feel trapped, if you feel that it's not the right place for you,
You don't fit the mold, or
it's not healthy for you or your family, there's hope. There's a way out. And it is scary. There will be lost relationships, but you will survive. And then ultimately you'll thrive.
Mhm.
And we feel we are on that path.
I felt like I almost felt relief when I discovered it wasn't true, because I already knew it was toxic because of the LGBTQ stuff. But I felt like I had to stay in because it was true. And then when I found out it wasn't true, I was like, oh, well, sweet.
Yeah.
A little bit, you know? It's obviously really hard still and scary, and your whole worldview is shifting. And we did, like, I was scared to let go of Christianity. Um, like there were a couple of Mormon Stories episodes I listened to where someone, you know, was atheist or whatever, and that scared me. I was like, I don't want to be atheist. I don't want to be agnostic or whatever. And so I was really clinging to the idea of Christianity. Similar to you, actually. Just thinking about that. I listened to your story and I related a lot with it, but yeah, just really clinging to Christianity for a little bit, and then kind of letting that go and realizing I don't know if I believe in the idea of us all being unworthy. It's like we all start out at unworthy, you know what I mean? And then someone has to save us, and I just feel like that's not a super healthy belief or something that I want to teach my kids. Like, someone had to die for you because you're so wicked, you know? Um, and so I believe in the things that Jesus taught. I think he taught a lot of beautiful things. I just don't believe that he was a deity. And yeah, that's kind of where I stand. I would consider myself agnostic. I believe in a higher power. I just don't know that we have the capacity to know much about that higher power. And for me right now, I feel like the highest power that I can experience in my life is love and human connection. And that's like, I thrive and seek that out, the human connection. Anytime I can talk to another person and hear their story and be vulnerable with them, like, that's when I feel that deep love in my heart and joy, you know? And so I seek out those opportunities, and that's church for me right now.
See, I like to hedge my bets. And so I'm in a place where I'm certainly agnostic. I don't necessarily believe that Jesus is the Son of God and everyone has to follow him or they're going to hell. But it might be true. I'm not completely against the idea, but I don't believe that sufficiently to become part of some organized religion and follow all these little steps. I think it's all about love, and that's simple. That's something that anyone can do regardless of education level or opportunity.
Or religion, or where they're born.
Yep.
Or yeah.
Yep. You can experience love by taking care of the people around you. But I mean, I guess the last thing I would want to say is, again, I feel like Mormons are my people, and I'm grateful for my heritage, and I admire the sacrifice of, the people who came before me and their commitment to follow their beliefs, to risk everything in pursuit of what they felt was true. And that's admirable to me. It doesn't mean I have to agree with their beliefs, but to all the, I guess, active members in my life, I want you to know that I do love you, and that my feelings toward the church they have nothing to do with you.
Yep.
And
it's not personal at all.
I know that it can come across as an attack, but that is not my intent. My intent is to get facts out there, help others who are struggling,
Inform, support.
Right. And love. If it works for you, wonderful. But please do not misinterpret, what I'm trying to do, because I feel that I've been liberated. I feel like, Stephanie has liberated me and my family, and I want everyone else to experience that if that's what they want. Mm-hmm. But I didn't even know that was an option until my eyes were opened. So that's why we do what we do.
And for our kids, it makes me so happy knowing that they're going to grow up without these crazy expectations,
Yeah.
They can be who they are.
Hey, and worst case scenario, celestial kingdom, right?
Joseph Smith said you'd kill yourself to get there. So
that's exactly what I was going to say. Are we twins?
Yeah. Yeah. Plus, you look at the celestial kingdom, everyone's wearing white and whispering. That's the celestial room. If that's going to be like the celestial kingdom, then I don't want to go there. I'd rather go to the terrestrial.
Telestial.
Which one are we going to?
Well, you're going to outer darkness because you're
we are going to outer darkness.
No, because someone said women can't be daughters of perdition. Some prophet did. So
what?
You're going to outer darkness, and I'll come visit you.
Okay.
Because it's only sons of perdition.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Finally,
we're lucky.
Everything's coming up for the women in Mormonism. I just want to read one comment really quick from a super chat. Garrett said, Garrett donated $20. Thanks so much,
thanks,
Garrett.
Awesome, Garrett.
As we're wrapping up, if anyone wants to donate on YouTube, there's a super chat feature that has a $sign. You can donate a little bit of money and help support the podcast. They said, first, live Mormon stories, never remote, but constantly surprised by how relatable it is to my past in a tight-knit fundamentalist evangelical community. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we get so many different, they're called Nevermos, of course. Who relate to these types of things.
I've heard that so many times from evangelical. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of the people on Instagram are of other faiths.
Yeah.
Who've
had similar experiences.
Yeah. Tight-knit communities where you don't even know that leaving is an option.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I definitely relate to that. One question that was just on my mind, Matt, so professionally, you are a lawyer, correct?
Correct.
I always am curious, people who their job is to deal in reason and logic constantly. How has deconstructing your faith, did you ever have compartmentalized two parts of your brain when you're Mormon? You're like reason and logic here, but then spiritual promptings here. And that those two things conflict, but you compartmentalize them. And then when you deconstruct your faith, I'll hear a lot of people who, have that as a profession will be like, how did I not ever question this when I'm a professional questioner?
Oh yeah.
So
absolutely. And I have, people in my family who are also lawyers, and, I've talked to them, and they're very smart people, but there's just this blind spot where it all goes out the window and it just comes down to mushy excuses and we don't know explanations, but we're okay with it. And it, as you said, it's just completely inconsistent with everything else in my life, with every other thing that I think about and try to process. I analyze, I look for evidence. I make sure that the evidence supports my argument and my conclusion. And if I do that with Mormonism, it fails every time. I tell Steph, if Mormonism were tried in a court of law, it would be convicted every time, unless the jury were in Utah.
Yeah.
But there's just too much evidence.
Yeah, go watch the Brother Jake videos. They're plug for those.
What's your favorite Brother Jake
They're
video?
hilarious.
Oh, the Book of Mormon ones are really good. There's like a four-part series.
So
It's
sorry that
pretty
you have the
convincing.
incorrect answer. The correct answer is Joseph Smith, the Hamilton parody. Do you know that one?
Hamilton parody?
Yeah.
It sounds like there's a new video I need to go watch.
Apparently. I don't want
I
to
thought,
ruin
I thought
it.
he stopped making videos like 9 years ago or something.
If you guys don't know, he does a great parody channel on YouTube. Brother Jake is everything I wish I could be. And he does a parody of the Hamilton song, but with the prophet's name is Joseph Smith. And there's a million things that he hasn't done, but just you wait, just you wait. And it just like throws up pictures of like Kinder Cook plates and stuff. And it's like the greatest rap of all time.
Well, and we're all going back to Missouri at some point, right?
Oh yeah. We're all gathering in Missouri.
Yeah.
In Jackson
Because
County,
the
Missouri.
world is supposed to combine against the members of the church.
Some members have
And they
already
won't-
headed there.
And they won't be safe. Even though half the population in the state are Mormon, we're all going to move to Missouri.
Yeah,
'Cause it'll be
some people
safer
are
there.
already there. All right. Well, as we're wrapping up, people are wanting to make sure that we get your Instagram account and anything else that you just final thoughts, final feelings.
Okay,
However
so
you want to wrap
yeah,
up.
our Instagram account is Not a Faith Crisis. So it's just at Not a Faith Crisis, but there are like underscores between the words.
We'll try to put
If
it
that
in the
makes
show
sense.
notes.
Yeah. Yeah, and
We have good conversation on there with active members, non-members,
yeah,
never mows.
some good
Yeah.
debates on there. But yeah, I just feel really grateful that my brother led the way for us to find the truth. And
And we did
glad that-
resign. We did resign. We were no longer members.
Yeah, we removed our names. Yeah, I'm just much happier, and I'm glad that I found out in my 30s. Like, I don't know. I just know a lot of people who find out, in their 60s, and
Your
they've
kids
spent
are
their
still
whole
young.
life. Yeah,
Right.
and their kids, and they leave, but their kids are still in. Like, that just like crushes me. So
Does.
I'm really glad that we found the truth when we did, and we can move on and help people. So through our Instagram account.
Somebody mentioned earlier in the chat asking if you were like up for excommunication because of a blog you wrote. Did you want to mention anything about that? Was that something?
It was like hearsay, I guess. The bishop supposedly, I mean, I believe it, but the bishop said something to our neighbor about like, what's their end goal?
What's their end?
What's their end game
or
with
whatever?
this Instagram account? Because at some
Okay.
point we're going to take action. We'll have to take action or something like that. So it was implied, we'll say.
And the high counselor who told me he'd agreed to a war against Mexico. He follows and regularly comments, on social media, and will just not address facts, but bears testimony that he knows everything's true. And you can't fight with the testimony.
Yeah, it works every time.
It does.
Yep.
Okay. Well, Matt, Stephanie, did we just come to the end of like an epic 6-hour Mormon story?
Yes, I am so sorry, viewers.
Whew.
Don't you dare apologize. I loved every minute. And I loved live streaming it. And I just love everything about you guys. And you guys are very raw and honest. And we've started out with some really heavy topics and we've made our way through it. I almost forgot that we started at like 1 p.m. today. Like we've been
I'm
here
so
like 10 o'clock
I'm
or
so
something?
exhausted. I have to admit, there were a couple times I dozed off.
You
So-
did. I pushed you.
Really? Sorry.
I don't know if the camera was on you, but
Sorry, viewers.
You're only allowed to doze off because you probably heard the story before.
I have like
but
a lot
I
of the stuff
wasn't.
he was saying I've heard before, so you just have a very soothing voice.
uh-huh.
Yeah. We were all riveted over here though. Trust me.
Yeah.
So it was good. It was awesome.
Well, thanks for listening to our story.
Yeah.
And I hope it helps someone.
Yeah,
I
me
think
too.
it'll definitely help a lot of people, especially anyone who's open and vulnerable about their abuse, that helps give other people the strength and courage to say, hey, what happened to me was also wrong and I'm not going to keep quiet about it anymore. So I always really respect people who are able to open up about those things, and especially in such a public platform and stuff.
And we'll try to keep up with our DMs. So anyone who struggles with something similar and needs someone to talk to, we're here. So
That's a beautiful offer. So thank you guys so much.
yeah,
I don't want it to end. It's 9:30 at night and we both have kids to get home too.
I guess so.
Oh man. All right. Well, I want to thank our lovely, amazing guests for all that they do for the post-Mormon community, Steph and Matt. And just if you are loving what they do, please follow them on their Instagram account and TikTok account, right?
Yeah,
Any
yeah,
others?
yeah. We need to do more videos on there, but we have a few that are good. So we have a few gems.
Yeah.
Same name, not a faith crisis. So
Yes. And that's why if you're watching part 1, what I said was so clever to John, where he said, we're going to talk about your faith crisis. And that's why I said, not a faith crisis. Now, does it make sense? Did my
Full circle.
everything's full circle?
if you have to explain the joke, it's
I'm just
not
speaking,
funny.
connecting the dots. Sometimes Mormon Stories listeners help me probably connecting the dots. That's all.
I'm just teasing that.
Don't worry, I'm not gonna like edit it into a TikTok clip highlighting that like I always do. Like, remember that time I was really witty and funny? Post. Anyway, now that I don't have a TikTok account, Nuance Ho is gone and dead now, apparently. Anyway,
You gotta get back.
Mormon Stories listeners, thanks for going on this journey with us. If you love this programming, you'll notice that we have no advertisements. Except for maybe if you're watching on YouTube, I guess that's monetized. But we are completely funded by our donors. So we cannot do this without our donors to Mormon Stories. So if you'd like to become a donor, click the button at the top of mormonstories.org and you become a one-time donor, monthly donor. All donations are tax deductible in the United States of America, and they really help out. Paying for all of this production, getting it up and running, takes a lot of money and effort and time to get these podcasts out to all of the platforms and make sure that they're edited and wonderful. And so if you enjoy this programming, please consider being a donor. And if you have any comments or questions, or if you think that you would make a really good guest, please reach out to us on our email at mormonstories@gmail.com. And make sure to tell John DeLynn that he was missed today. And everyone give a big round of applause for, I moved it. My can of Red Bull is actually, let's all give a big round of applause for our can of Red Bull. Thank you so much. That got us through this evening.
Got us through.
A slow clap.
Yeah, and our extra water bottles and everything. So thanks everyone for your super chats and your comments. This has been really, really fun. So I have been your host, Carah Burrell, for the day. And we just love you so much. So take care of everybody in your life. Just be kind, be loving. Hope you took some good messages home from everything amazing that Matt and Stephanie said today. And we'll catch you guys all later on another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. All right. Peace out, everybody.
Good night and good luck.
Bye.
Bye.